Even men at the top of their game find themselves wanting more from life. Whether it's more meaning, unshakable confidence, a bigger impact, more money, deeper love, a hotter sex life, or a powerful legacy. Find out how good your life can be on this episode of Man Alive. Also, as I've supported men in their love and work lives for 15 years now, many men ask for the right words to say to be more successful, attractive, and desirable. But I found it's not so simple as giving scripts or lines because every man is different. So giving words or scripts would be like giving a tall, thin man a shorter, wider man's pants, or vice versa. The words have to make sense for you and your personality, and there's so much happening beneath the surface that people are responding to. If you're interested in how to become a better lover and leader in your own unique way, go to shanajamescoaching.com/quiz, or you can text ALIVE to 44144. It only takes a couple minutes and you'll start to get an idea of how you can be both more respected and desired. After you fill it out, we can schedule a time to review your quiz and talk about your specific challenges and desires. So again, go to either shanajamescoaching.com/quiz or text ALIVE to 44144. That's ALIVE to 44144. Enjoy this episode of Man Alive. Hello, and welcome to this episode of Man Alive. I am here today with Lion Goodman. Lion, thank you so much for being here today.
It's a great pleasure, Shayna. I really appreciate being invited.
We are going to talk about some of the, I would call them sort of invisible issues, or some of the root issues of relationship and the way relationships get sabotaged. And Lion is the perfect person to have this conversation with, because I'm going to read your bio, because Lion has been called a belief therapist, a subconscious pattern detective, and a healer of the psyche. He helps people heal core wounds from childhood, deletes old programming from subconscious mind, and has a process that clears away limitations, resistance, and blocks that interfere with creating the life you want. And he's led trainings in the art of manifestation, improving relationships, healing male narcissism, clearing beliefs to change your reality, and has also written 4 books: Creating on Purpose, The Spiritual Technology of Manifestation, Clear Your Beliefs, The Narcissism Primer, and Menlightenment, a book for awakening men. So you've had, a wide repertoire in your career. I mean, it's in a way focused on personal growth and depth and understanding our psyche and our wounds and our history and being able to bring that into life and love now. But I'm really appreciating both the depth and the breadth that you've covered.
Well, the reason that I have so many interests is because when I was a kid, I felt very weird and alone, and other people thought of me as weird. So I was a weird kid. And I wanted to find out why I was so different.
Yeah.
And so I began very early trying to figure out other people. Why do they do the things they do? Why do they say the things they say?
Yeah.
How come they're so weird? How come I'm so weird? How come I don't belong? So it started me on a very long journey of self-exploration, trying to find the real keys to how can I be myself? How can I be a better person? How can I be a better person in a relationship?
It just gives me so much hope for, being a parent and watching my child and whatever struggles and realizing, right, like your struggles brought you to this place of deep understanding and wisdom. So we don't have to always take away other people's struggles. But, speaking of that, right, in relationship, there is this tendency that we bring our childhoods into relationship with our partners, and we think that we are adults, and yet we're relating from these really, really young places. And so, I'm curious, what do you see most often, right, when you're working with people that people are bringing to each other without realizing it?
Well, there's many explanations or attempts to explain why we behave that way in relationship. One of the simplest is that as children, we learn what love is by watching our parents, how they treat and love each other, how they treat and love us. And so if, for example, there's a lot of arguments, that's what love is to a child. Mm-hmm. So my natural tendency is to go and be attracted to someone who is familiar. And right. Familiar comes from the word family. So if I see their tendency to want to argue, that's going to feel like love to me. I'm going to be very attracted to that.
Even though in our conscious mind, we wouldn't necessarily say that, but down deep, right? There's a sense of, oh, I know this.
Yes.
Uh-huh.
Yes. And maybe I can do better this time. It's like there's also this
I have
desire
that
to,
one.
yeah, it's also the desire to make it work this time. If I,
Yeah.
I want to make daddy love me the way I want to be loved, or I want to
Mm-hmm.
make mommy take care of me the way I want to be taken care of. So, so there's that issue also, is there's a deep psychological desire to make it right, to get the love we always wanted and didn't get.
Yeah.
And our subconscious mind is like a searchlight looking for that perfect person who will give us that opportunity to have what we had as a child. So that's one of the basic explanations for why this happens.
It's so powerful and painful to recognize that.
Yes, indeed.
And so you work with people to really start to unhook some of those core old beliefs. Yeah.
Yes, and when I use the word beliefs, I'm not talking about a mental construct like I
Uh-huh.
believe in God or I don't believe in God. I'm talking about the infrastructure of the human mind.
Yeah.
So brains are made of neurons, minds are made of beliefs. So beliefs are built from experience, right? And experience is multidimensional. So a belief is also multidimensional. It's got a mental component, an emotional component, a physical component, and a spiritual component. And so if you want to clear a belief, you have to clear it from all those areas, all those aspects of the self. Because if you just change your mind, your conscious mind, I'm going to believe something different, it doesn't get to the subconscious roots.
No.
If you scream out loud and beat a pillow, that's great emotionally, but it doesn't connect to the mental or the physical or the emotional aspects. So my processes that I developed over many, many years of research, are all based on a multidimensional approach to clearing it out of all of our bodies, our subconscious mind, our conscious mind, and our superconscious mind, or the higher self.
That's so powerful. And do you really, like when you say clear, what happens, right? Can you give an example of, someone who's reacting in a certain way or attracting a certain type of partner, or, having this dynamic that they've had for decades? And then what happens as you actually clear it? And then, what's the result of that?
Sure. I'll give a story about myself. As a young man, I blamed the women I was with for whatever was happening. And through a therapeutic process, I realized that I had the belief it's all her fault, which was basically it's my mother's fault.
Yeah.
Because every woman represents mother in the male brain. Right? You can't help it. And similarly, in the female brain, every man represents father. So when I cleared the belief, it's my mother's fault, and I got, it's not my mother's fault. All of a sudden, I could take responsibility for my part in whatever was happening, and I could own what was happening and therefore change it. If it's somebody else's fault, you can't change anything.
Right. You have no power.
That. Right. Yeah. Right. And you're not changing yourself. So that's an example. And whatever that core belief is, love is abuse. That's a big one, right? So if someone's in that field that's created by that belief, love is abuse, you're going to keep attracting abusive relationships over and over again.
Yeah.
When you clear the belief and you go, love is not abuse, love is care and kindness, everything shifts. Suddenly you are going to be more kind and caring, and you're going to look for someone who's more kind and caring.
I love that. Yeah, it's really powerful to see. I mean, I've been divorced, and I remember, I just remember many components, right? I remember the words in my head that I could hear that my mom used to speak to my dad, and how unhappy she was with him, and how, resentful she was with him. And I remember hearing those voices and then having to choose, okay, wait, that's not my reality necessarily. My reality, I can see, broader, I can see deeper than what she said, but it still clouds my vision. It still was kind of partly, it's like a cataract or something.
Yes, exactly. In fact, that's one of the analogies I use for beliefs, is that
Really?
we see through our beliefs.
Yes.
When we're born, it's quite open. You look at a baby and everything's new and beautiful and bright and and interesting. And then we start inserting beliefs into the child. This is your name. This is who you are. You're male. You're female. This is what you should do. Shouldn't do. Don't touch that. That's okay. And that begins to cloud the lens that we're looking through, like a cataract. And over time, that lens becomes very dark, and pretty soon all we can see is what fits through the lens, which is our beliefs. So if you believe, for example, life is hard, and that's very solid in you, you look around through that lens and you see how hard life is everywhere you look.
Yes.
And if you change that belief filter to life is joy, then you look around and suddenly you're seeing joy everywhere. So it's really very fundamental to our perceptions, and all beliefs are self-verifying for this reason. That's why trying to argue with someone about their beliefs is usually not worth your time, because they're seeing through that lens. And until you understand their lens that they're perceiving through, you can't really change their mind.
Okay. So that just brought up a question, when two people are in relationship, and what you really want to do, in one moment may be to change that person's mind, right? Your partner who's fighting for a specific belief and you're on the other side, and then clearly you must have a belief because their belief doesn't seem right. How do you navigate that, or help people navigate those?
First step would be to stop, because it's going to be pretty useless to try to change the other person's mind. What you can do is you can become curious. And ask, tell me more about how you see that.
I love that.
That opens the person up to the possibility that you might have a different way of seeing things. Right. But you have to listen first and really try to understand their point of view. And then they may become open to your point of view. But as soon as there's a make wrong involved, as soon as there's a you're stupid, demeaning, now we're in reactive mode, and all bets are off.
Yeah. So powerful. I was just thinking too, when I work with people, compassionate curiosity and stopping is one of the first things, right, that I suggest as well. It's like, if we aren't listening and we aren't actually truly understanding or trying to step into the shoes of the other person we're with, and we just continue fighting for our side, right, we're doing the same thing that we are complaining that our partner's doing. And so it's such a powerful thing to really get curious and try to understand someone and listen fully before we then launch into our side of it.
How right we are. Yes. It's I call it sudden reaction syndrome. Anything can trigger us into our old defensive posture. And of course, the amygdala in the brain is the threat detector. So it's always on alert to see whether there's any kind of threat that looks anything like threats before. So our whole history of being threatened, hurt, destroyed, been cruel to, anything that looks like that our partner does, or sounds like that, or smells like that, will trigger the amygdala to go on to red alert. Now we're in fight or flight syndrome. And basically the cortex, the thinking mind, gets shut off. And this is another reason why it's silly to argue with somebody who's having an emotional reaction, because their cortex, their thinking brain, is not functioning. So you have to get the person to come back into what we call green instead of yellow or red. The red is the fire alarm, yellow is the smoke alarm. And so one of the things we teach is what we call the three nonverbal love languages. And this is what a baby needs, because babies needs, we all have the same needs. What a baby needs is to be held, right? To be held physically, to hear a soft voice that says you're safe, it's okay, I've got you, and to see in the other person's eyes, the gazing. So I teach men that when your woman is reacting and exploding, trying to talk to her or argue with her is useless. But what you can do is hug them and say, I've got you. It's okay. I love you. It's going to be okay. Then her brain can quiet down.
Settles.
That's right. And you can feel her actually physically settling. It's like, oh, I am loved. I'm not going to be abandoned. I'm not going to be hurt. And now that's only with her permission. If she doesn't want you to
I was just imagining that, right? Like that it might be too close in a moment for someone to come in.
You might just open your arms and say, if you'd like a hug, I would like to hug
I'm
you.
here.
That allows the woman to have power over that. She's not being assaulted.
Yeah.
So that's one of the tricks of getting out of the sudden reactions.
I love that. Sudden reaction syndrome.
Mm-hmm.
It's a powerful way to recognize, right, that we can't, there's really nowhere to get to even if one of us is in the red, right? If both of us are in the red, then even more so. But even if one person's in the red, like the patients, I think Terry Real talks about, what does he say? I don't know if you know this saying where it's like withstanding the mini disappointments, or the where it's like tolerating when you actually want to resolve something in your relationship and the other person is not available for it, or the other person is having a reaction, and that's so hard. I know for myself sometimes to be like, I just want to get this over with. I just want this to be done. I want this to be solved. I want us to come back together. And so that can cause a little bit more pushing. And, as I say that, I think more about attachment styles and anxiety versus avoidance. And I know you work with that as well.
I do. And that was the same segue I was going for. So 30, 40 years ago, people began researching attachment, how attachment happens in humans. Yeah. We know how it happens in ducks. Ducks will attach to
ducks.
Ducks, yes. When ducks come out of the egg, they look for the biggest object near them that looks alive and begin to follow them. And this is an old
right. I was that
psychology text.
Yes.
Right? A man walking around with ducks following him.
Yeah.
Because they bonded with him. He was the large object to which they became attached.
If so only it was that easy in our human life.
Yes, right.
Well, or not.
It turns out it is. We do want to attach to the mother first initially, or the caregiver, whoever that is. And in an ideal scenario, I'm going to use the term mother equaling any caregiver who's the primary caregiver.
Yeah.
The mother is supposed to take care of the child. The child has a built-in expectation: I'm going to be cared for, because if I don't, I'm going to die.
I will die. Yep.
Yeah. So that's how crucial it is that they get the care and attention that they want and need. Mm-hmm. So a good mother will hold the baby and say, I've got you. You're perfect just the way you are. You're a baby, so you can't talk yet and you can't control your body yet. But I'm going to be here every step of the way, and I'm going to help you, and you're going to grow, and you're going to be just like the people around you.
Yeah.
And I'm going to be here. And if just let me know whenever you need something, I'll be right there. Yeah. That is called secure attachment. The baby knows that if she cries and makes a fuss, someone will be there to take care of her.
Mm-hmm.
Now we look at that as a belief. The built-in belief, even though it's not verbal, is if I cry and make a fuss, I will be cared for.
Yes.
That's a really good belief for a baby. Not so good for an adult.
Not so good for an adult.
And this brings up the problems of beliefs, is that when we form a belief, even if we learn other things later, the old belief doesn't go away. It just gets pushed down into the subconscious mind.
Yes.
And that's where a lot of our reactions come from, is those old beliefs, right? So we've got secure attachment. Now let's talk about insecure attachment.
Mm-hmm.
So if the mother is not giving all of that to the baby, she may have other things to do. She maybe has 5 other kids and a house to keep. She may be not very well herself. She might have postpartum depression. Mm-hmm. She might be fighting with her husband or afraid of her husband. And she doesn't have the attention it takes to give that child secure attachment. So depending on what the child gets, the child will go toward one strategy or another. If there's random feedback, it's like randomly I will care for you. The baby thinks, oh my God, I've got to look and see whether I'm going to be cared for,
yes,
and pay really close attention. And this is called insecure anxious. Mm-hmm. So the anxious type will be hypervigilant, and basically an adult with insecure anxious will tend to escalate conversations. Like, the real question is, do you love me? Do you love me now? How about now? Do you love me?
How about now? How about now?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So these tendencies move all the way through our adulthood and our adult relationships. If the child is really not getting enough attention at all, they can basically say, okay, I'm not going to get the attention I need.
Yep.
So I'm going to withdraw from my needs. I'm going to withdraw from my body. It's too uncomfortable. I'm just going to go into my head or out of my body, and I'm going to avoid needing, because needing is too anxiety producing.
Yes.
And that's where you get the insecure avoidant type.
Uh-huh.
Now, just because of how we're brought up, men tend toward being the avoidant type, and women tend toward being the anxious type. It's not always true. And
right.
these
Yeah,
types,
it can cross.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's also hybrids.
Right.
There were people where with one parent you're anxiously attached, and with the other parent you're avoidantly attached. So,
yes.
A different person will bring out different responses.
Qualities or responses. Yeah.
That's right. So it turns out that avoidance and anxious types tend to be attracted to each other. Why? Because the anxious baby has kind of an avoidant mother. She's avoiding caring for them.
Uh-huh.
The avoidant baby has possibly an anxious mother who's there, with her nervous energy, or in my mother's case, kind of a black hole of need, And it was like, whoa, that's overwhelming to me.
That's too much.
I'm out of here.
Yeah.
So, classic trigger system in a couple is that the man may do something or say something that causes the woman to be anxious, like, oh, he might leave me, and then she escalates in order to make sure she's got the connection and he's not going to leave her.
Yeah.
And that escalation triggers him into avoiding, and then the avoidance triggers her into abandonment issues where, like, he's about to go away.
Right.
And then she escalates more, which causes him to leave the room. And now she's freaking out and he's freaking out, going, oh, I can't handle that.
Right. This is too much. I can't handle this. She's, this, and she's like, I can't do this. Right. All the, yes, the classic.
Yeah. There's another attachment style called insecure traumatic or traumatized. And that is where there's a scary parent. The parent is not just not caring, but they actually are violent or yelling or crazy in some way. And so that disorganizes the whole brain. It's like the baby doesn't know what to do. And so you can tell a traumatized person, even if they haven't talked about their background, because they tend to sort of blow up for no reason, like way bigger than is called for.
Do they blow, not freeze? They don't freeze. They actually explode emotionally.
Yeah, exploding is the most telling indicator that there's trauma there.
Interesting.
Because freezing is another trauma reaction, but most often you see it as exploding. So you say, please pass the butter, and they go, what's wrong with you? Why can't you get butter yourself? So it's like suddenly it's really big, out of proportion to what's occurring.
Yeah.
So, and again, there can be hybrids. You can be traumatized avoidant or traumatized anxious, or it's rare to be traumatized secure. What we're all going for is to be securely attached.
Yes.
Because that means that in our coupledom, I'm there for you and you're there for me, and I care for you and you care for me. And so all of the good parts of a relationship are there in secure attachment.
Yes. Now, one of the questions that's coming up for me, because over the years, I've had clients who they come to me, they're doing the work, right? They want to have a better relationship. They want to connect with a partner. And sometimes the partner is either too traumatized or, unwilling and dismissive. And it has me curious, how you suggest when there's an unwilling partner that someone would move forward or, get closer.
Yeah, I have some bad news here. We have in our practice, my wife and I also work with couples a lot.
Yeah.
And if one of the couple, it takes two to tango, right?
Yes.
It takes two people to ruin a relationship, and it takes two people to heal a relationship.
Yeah.
And if one person just says, no, it's her problem or it's his problem, it's not mine, I don't own anything, it's really difficult to get past that one. If one person just says, I'm fine the way I am, you do whatever you do, go off and do that. Basically, we have trajectories, and that's basically two people going off in different trajectories.
Yes.
It's rare to bring the other person back unless there's a significant potential loss. Like, for example, the woman may say, if you don't do this, I'm leaving.
I'm leaving.
And that may wake him up.
Yes.
And it may not. But if it does, there's an opening to, the old saying from psychotherapy, how many psychotherapists does it take to change a light bulb? Only one, but the light bulb has to really want to change.
Right.
So it's that kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a tough one, right? You know,
Very
to
tough.
get to a place where you want to grow and the person sitting across from you just doesn't.
Yeah, I have a lot of clients who are in that position, and what advice can you give them other than, well, leave and go off on your own, because it's never going to get better
Yeah.
with that attitude.
Yeah.
Uh, you go
Yeah.
find someone who actually does want to grow.
Right. I mean, because what amazes me is that any of us make it in relationship, right? With so little training and all of this and so much wounding, even like from unintentional, like you said, a mom has other kids or other things going on, or the babies being raised right now who are in the midst of a pandemic and wildfires and right. Babies don't always get exactly what they need. And so then we all have this that we bring to our adult relationships.
To paraphrase great psychiatrist R.D. Laing, um, uh, relationships can go wrong in so many ways. It's amazing that they ever go right.
Yeah.
And that's what you were just saying.
Yes, that's exactly how I look at it. I'm like, wow. But I also see that when we're willing to look at ourselves and when we're willing to see, oh, I am not that part of, whether it's internal family systems or parts work or, spiritual practice, I'm not my ego self. I'm actually this other part of myself. When we're actually willing to look at ourselves and not defend ourselves, there's such beauty that can happen. And it does amaze me that many people seem kind of stuck in this pattern of, I know I think about sometimes like, wizards versus muggles. Like a muggle relationship to me seems like there is no sense of self, maybe not no, but little self-reflection or little sense of, oh, we could have more intimacy. We could actually work with these conflicts and these patterns. Whereas the wizard relationship, there's a little more of a sense of, okay, you've got your view, I've got my view. I'm not my view. You're not your view. We can actually navigate this together.
Yeah, that's a very enlightened way of seeing a relationship. It's said that the subconscious mind is 95 to 99% of our responses and reactions to the world.
Yeah. Yeah.
What you're talking about in an enlightened relationship, you take that 1% awakening and you increase it to 2 and 3 and 5 and 10. That's doing really well. That's when you recognize all the things you said. I am a spiritual being having a human experience, or you. Yes. We're the same. So that is a great place to get to. And for some people, it takes a long while. They have to wake up from wherever they are.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's pretty deep where they are. They're in a big hole that's been covered over by all their reactions and their history.
Yes.
And the hole was dug while they were still in the womb or even before.
Right.
Now, the one thing I want to mention is that what I see in many of my clients is that their first belief structure formed while they were still in the womb.
Yeah.
So, for example, if the mother is afraid because of poverty or war or a violent husband, her fear hormones are going right into the baby, and the baby's living and growing in fear. Yes. So the baby may come out of the world, out of the womb, with the belief, with the multicellular experience that the world is a dangerous place.
Yeah.
And so our programming starts then, and it continues throughout our life through indoctrination, through the conclusions we come to from what's happening, through what other people say about us and tell us, teachers, religious leaders, siblings, family, extended family members, the culture, the media. It's like we have tens of thousands of beliefs to work with. Yeah. And so it's a long path, and it's a great path to be on. It's a path of awakening.
That just has me feel into the compassion that not only we need to bring to partners and other people, but to ourselves, right? That we were dealt a hand. We didn't necessarily, you could see, depending how you look at choice, but it wasn't like we said, oh, I'm going to choose these patterns that my parents have, again, unless some people do believe, right? We chose our parents or we came in that way. But for most of us, that sense of, wow, I was born into this. I didn't have a choice when I was a young child.
Yeah, and that is true. So from a spiritual perspective, yes, we choose everything. We choose the circumstances of our birth and the wounds that we get in order to develop the skills and abilities that are there for us to fulfill our life purpose. Mm-hmm. That's a spiritual perspective. If you have a spiritual perspective, that's great, but you can't lay it on somebody else who's not there.
Right.
Like, oh, just take responsibility for that cancer you created. I mean, that's really misusing the whole understanding of creation and responsibility. So we are victimized by people. There are real victims. There are real victimizers. How we respond is our responsibility, right? So the more able we are to respond to that, whether it happened in the past, the present, or in the future, that's what determines our ability to live life successfully. It's, we've all had bad stuff happen. The ACE study, Adverse Childhood Experiences study from the CDC and Kaiser, it shows that a huge proportion of the population has had some very bad thing happen to them in childhood. And many people have 4 or 5 or 10 bad things that happen to them: divorce, death, violence, starvation, rejection, abandonment. There's so much that can happen to that child that forms their basic personality, that we all are carrying that luggage with us. And it just has to be slowly, steadily, consistently undone and undone and undone. And then we can wake up out of it and have new options.
Yeah. I was just thinking too, I know you work with narcissism, and does it feel like too much to add to the soup to see how that relates to everything you've been talking about?
It's actually pretty easy to relate, because at the extreme end of avoidance is narcissism. Now, narcissism as a word gets misused a lot in our culture. So often women will say to their husband, "You're such a narcissist." Now, the problem is that narcissist is a word that is short for narcissistic personality disorder, which is an actual psychopathy that only a psychiatrist or a psychologist who's trained can diagnose. That's at the very extreme end. And we know people who are like that. In fact, there's some in public office at the moment. But setting that aside, narcissism actually just means self-orientation. And that's a very wide spectrum. So, for example, at the very low end of that is I go to the gym every day to stay buff and to keep myself looking good. That's self-orientation. It's healthy. So there's nothing really wrong with it. We don't say, "Oh, you're so selfish," unless you're avoiding your family responsibilities. Then it's selfish, right?
Yes.
And so if you think of that spectrum from good self-care to toxic narcissistic personality disorder, there's a very wide range. We're all selfish in some ways. The question is, how are you generally, and how do you react when something happens? So the more you react and blame the other person, the more narcissistic you are. The more you avoid and leave and don't come back for days, the more narcissistic you are. But there's a very wide spectrum. So what tendencies do you have in that regard? I was fortunate in having very good women in my life who pointed out that I was pretty narcissistic.
And it sounds like you actually heard it. Like you didn't have to, maybe at times.
It took a few repetitions.
It took some time,
It took one of my partners to say, "Read this article. I think you'll find it interesting." And I go, "Oh my God, that's me." So that's why I recommend women take my narcissism primer and just leave it around the house.
Interesting.
Don't say anything.
Don't say anything, but leave it where a man would find it.
Right. What is this? Oh, that's interesting. Anyway, so what I discovered is that actually my life was built around, I'm going to take care of myself. She's going to take care of herself. Independent people. We're both humans. I don't really need to take her into consideration because she's taking care of herself, and she'll say something if she wants to.
Right. And I just flashed back to what you said about your mom and how, it was like, whoa, too much.
Exactly.
You need to get away from this.
Get away from any demands, any criticism. I'll just separate myself. So I really investigated narcissism to understand what it's made of. And as I turned over the material, I realized, okay, this is a tendency in me, and it can change. So instead of thinking, okay, I'm going to go off tonight, I'll see you later, it's I'm thinking of going off tonight. What do you think, and how would it impact you? I care, and I'm willing to negotiate or navigate it so that you get taken care of as well.
I love that.
Instead of me taking care of myself, it's me taking care of myself, taking care of you, and taking care of us, the third point of the triangle.
And it's not, right, I just want to point out, it's not going all the way to the other end of the spectrum and giving up any desire that you have to go do a thing or to take care of yourself. right? It's that middle ground.
Right. And at the other extreme of narcissism is codependency,
Yes.
which is you're the most important person. I'll do whatever it takes to make you happy.
Mm-hmm.
I'll
I'll
sacrifice
be
my
happy
own
when you're
needs.
happy.
That's
Mm-hmm.
right. That's
Mm-hmm.
right. So narcissists and codependents get together very often, and they get very well. They get along very well because they both agree who's the most important person.
Right. Right. In the beginning until
Well, until it's painful. Yeah.
until it's painful. Right. Yeah. Well, thank you. I feel there's so much richness in what you're talking about, and such a way for people to start to reflect and see, okay, do I have any of these tendencies, and what lenses am I looking through, or beliefs am I looking through, and am I taking care of myself, or am I actually having some element of narcissism here? Or am I, now that I can see what narcissism is, I realize, oh, I actually give up my desires because I'm trying to please other people. So I really feel like, what we said we were going to talk about, those invisible, or they're invisible until we reveal them, right?
Yes.
These invisible saboteurs or issues that show up in relationship. I think you've really gone into them.
It goes very deep.
Yes, it
We
goes
go deep.
very deep. Right. We're peeling the surface, peeling the first layer of the onion.
Right. Right.
Yes. Is there anything that feels important that you want to bring to people before we finish this conversation? Anything you'd feel like, oh, if I don't say that, that would be missing?
Sure. My wife and I offer a what we call the Love Style Profile assessment, which takes about 5 minutes, but you get kind of a basic education about the different attachment styles and
Yeah.
where you are on each of those spectrums. So that's, you can go to that, get to that. It's free at lovestyleprofile.com.
Mm-hmm.
And also my book, The Narcissism Primer, is also available for free. I think you wanted to give that. Should I give the URL or do you want to?
Yeah, you can. Great.
Okay. It's confusedaboutlove.com, which is our relationship website, slash narcissism dash primer.
Awesome.
And that will get you the narcissism primer. And it's really good. It's written for men particularly, but a lot of women read it to understand narcissism. The last thing I wanted to say is that for anyone who's in relationship with someone who has narcissistic tendencies,
Mm-hmm.
it's important. I'm asked quite often, well, how do I know if he will change?
Yeah.
How do I know if
Or she, right? Yeah, either one.
Right. If your partner cares about their impact, when you say I'm hurt,
Mm-hmm.
I feel bad, there's a good possibility that they can learn and grow and change their narcissistic characteristics.
Yeah.
If they don't care,
yeah,
that's pretty much the end point. That's on that spectrum of narcissism. That's the point at which it's probably not going to work out,
yeah,
and you should probably leave.
Yes.
Right? And there's a lot of websites out there about leave your narcissist, leave, get out of the relationship, because those are people who were in a relationship with a toxic narcissist, someone
Right.
who has extreme NPD. But there is such a wide spectrum. We need to be able to work through the spectrum and know where we are on it.
Yeah. It's so powerful. I mean, I work with many men who identify as nice guys. And so I think, there's sometimes they end up in relationships with women who are more narcissistic and unwilling to see the impact. And so, definitely seeing that it goes both ways. And yeah, it's a tough call, right? To be in one of those moments in a relationship where it's like, okay, is this actually, are we making any progress? Are we actually changing and growing together? Are we becoming closer? And so I also appreciate you. It's not permission that you're giving, but that sense of reality, right? That sometimes it is time to leave, and that's okay as well. That is a choice that some of us make, that I've made, that other people have made, as we recognize, okay, this relationship isn't caring, isn't compassionate, isn't connected in a way.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, so I appreciate that piece as well.
Yeah, it's important to be realistic in the real world, because our relationships are such a significant part of our life.
Yes.
And if your relationship ain't happy, ain't nobody going to be happy.
You're not going to be happy. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for being here today. And I highly recommend for you listening to check out Lion's resources, around beliefs, around narcissism, around love and relationships. There's so much here for you. So thank you, Lion.
Thank you, Shana. It's great to be here.
I'm so glad you joined us for today's episode of Man Alive. I hope you enjoyed our conversation and it gave you something to consider and explore in your life. If you like what you heard, I'd be so grateful for you to subscribe and write a quick review that helps men like you find us. And again, head over to shanajamescoaching.com/quiz or text the word ALIVE, ALIVE, to 44144 to get a sense of how you can become a better lover and leader. You'll start to see how you can be both more respected and desired in your unique and genuine way. If you don't feel as confident or as excited about life or love as you'd like to be, this quiz is a really great starting point and will guide you toward a more passionate love life and a more inspiring and successful career. So again, text ALIVE, ALIVE, to 44144 or head over to shanajamescoaching.com/quiz. Join us each week for a new episode of Man Alive.